Are we live? Are we happening? When I see the oceans in your eyes, suddenly there's no tomorrow. When I hear the river of your voice, no yesterday can entice me away. When I feel your mountain beside me, as tempests around me are raging, and I sense your roots here inside me, no yesterday can entice me away. Hush now, my mind, awake now, my soul, for here in my arms lies the earth and the skies and the seas and the reason I'm home. I'm home. Touch now my mind, awake now my soul. Hush now my mind, awake now my soul. For here in my arms lies the earth and the sky and the seas and the reason I'm home. When I see the oceans in your eyes, suddenly there's no tomorrow, and I hear the river of your voice. No yesterday can entice me away. When I feel your mountain beside me, as tempests around me are raging, and I sense your roots here inside me, no yesterday can entice me away. When I see the oceans in your eyes, just horsing around, just playing around. No. The song I wrote for my husband when I was getting over being terrified of performing. And God sent a beautiful young lady to live in our home to help me with the kids and the homeschooling so that I could develop a venue for performing in our barn. And we developed this place called Dream Farm Cafe. And it wound up being internationally known, because of my radio show, which is still on a whole series of NPR stations across the country. It's called Dream Farm Radio. So if you want to check out, you can go to dreamfarmradio.org and you can see photos of the farm and so many concerts we had, shows, and all the bands that came through. We've got 8 seasons of incredible music. You can put your email in there and just get these episodes every week of these, what I call synergy jazz. That's where jazz music plays in the sandbox with rock, with Latin, with classical music, with traditional, even folk music. Jazz has this way of sparking everything up. That's what Joni Mitchell did. One of the things that really separated Joni Mitchell from the pack was when she began to explore jazz music. In fact, she was married to Jaco Pastorius, a really, really famous jazz bass player for a while. So anyways, hello, everyone. So Dream Farm Radio, what became this thing that grew out of me needing to get over being afraid to perform. And everything I do is usually sparked by the need to keep the ground, to increase the ground. So you know what? After my adventure last week, the Lord gave me a dream. And in the dream, he kind of offered me 2 alternatives. And one of them was to take care of my artist heart more profoundly. And he was showing me how I was draining from that. And I could have really committed myself to a whole other set of very worthwhile sounding things. In fact, the more I think about it, and I think about what I've been coaching you guys about, how there's purpose in what you are afraid of doing, deep purpose buried in that. And the amazing thing is that there will be opportunities for you to avoid that by doing things that seem like they're so much more altruistic and better for the world. And in my dream, I had 2 choices. One was for me to spend my life doing something that sounded and looked very, very loving. I would be in a deeply involved caretaking role, and my whole life would be changed by the responsibilities of caretaking for someone who had a great deal of limitation. And I was about ready to marry that option. And it seemed like just the most wonderful, loving thing to do, to put my whole life in that sort of selfless world of taking care of this situation in the dream. The second part of the dream was me in some home that I owned, running all over the place and taking care of a million things and having the opportunity. Thank you, Maria, for putting that out there, dreamfarmradio.org. That's right. You definitely want to sign up for those weekly episodes. You have nothing to lose. There's no spamming. You just get incredible jazz music. I always interview the musicians very personally. I always perform with them. So in any event, and they're musicians from all over the world. So in the second part of the dream, I was so busy being the housewife in the house, taking care of things, that I wasn't able to greet my guests. And the guests who were coming to my home were my guitar professor, Ellie Kastner, who was this incredible man. I studied with him at the Royal Conservatory of Music in Toronto and at University of Toronto. And he was an Austrian Jew whose whole family was pretty much nuked in Auschwitz, except for he and his brother. And he was a musician, an incredible man who pioneered classical guitar instruction in the most beautiful way and had the most famous people in the world in his house for soirees. So as a student at the university, I would go to parties at Ellie's house and I could meet John Williams and I could meet, Paco de Lucia, and I could meet, everybody except for Segovia, who had pretty much died by that point. But he had actually done master classes with Segovia and learned from him. And he was my teacher. And he represented in the dream everything that my artist heart longed to do. And in the dream, he was coming to my house to host a soiree. And that would mean that some of the best and most famous guitarists and musicians in the world would be at my house. But what was I doing? In the first part of the dream, I was almost giving myself to this altruistic, lifelong work to take care of a situation with tons of neediness, and it looked really, really good. In the second part of the dream, I'm closer to this artist thing, but I'm dressed in flannels. I'm running all over the place. My hair is a mess. I can't greet any of the guests. And guess what? I'm not overplaying with the musicians or enjoying the musicians. I'm the Martha. I'm running around and I'm thinking, well, what do you expect me to do? I got to take care of this house. It's so busy. And then I start worrying, well, wait a minute. I think I have room for Ellie, but if any of these other musicians need a place to stay, I'm screwed because the house is full. And I had this moment where I thought it would be really nice if I could host them as a gracious, hostess, dressed for the part and welcoming and involved in the music. And maybe they'd even let me play with them. And in the dream, this longing, this familiar longing of wanting to bring my guests, maybe the real musicians will let me play with them. Maybe, and I could hear this incredible, there was like a cellist and a couple of guitarists. And I remember walking past the room on my way to do all these chores. And I remember watching one guitarist, and I watched how he held the instrument up like this. And he was doing rest strokes. And he was using big, wide strokes. And he was using big, wide strokes, and he was holding the instrument a certain way. And I remember thinking to myself, I know exactly why he's doing that. I know exactly how he's producing that sound. I understand it. But I'm so busy. My house is so full. I have these chores to do. I'm the washerwoman. I'm the scrub woman. Maybe someday I'll be done with all that. And maybe I'll find room for these musicians in my house. And maybe I'll find that they'll let me play with them. So let me ask you, dear listeners, what do you think God was saying to me? What do you think those dreams meant? Well, after having the adventure I had the previous week, doing a lot of heavy lifting over a situation that was extremely high maintenance and extremely emotional and involved and would continue to involve a ton of caretaking and would define my time and energy as the fixer caretaker, God allowed me to see two sides. Was I going to marry my time, energy, purpose, and identity toward being the caretaker for a situation that would make me look very, very altruistic, very loving and caring, but would also suck all the life out of me? Hire a maid. That's funny, Maria. That was one option. The second option was the part of the dream where God was saying, you want to be with the musicians. And if you're not careful, you're not going to have time, energy, or room for them. You're not going to have room in your house for the musicians, the music I've brought to you. You're not, because you still seeing yourself as the person who has to be the maid, and everything is so crazy busy, and you're not even you're not even important enough to be with the musicians and to be where the action is, and you're so busy married to the job, so busy married to the housework. And here your house is filled with the best musicians in the world, and somewhere inside you know you're supposed to be there. And that was a wake-up call to me, because after what I experienced a week before, and when it cost me, and what's happening and the depth of the need, it was like the Lord was offering me two choices. So I talked, God was saying, go get your guitar. I talked to you guys about this. And I also learned from an author by the name of Pressman, who's written this book called The War of Art. So we know about the art of war, Sun Tzu's Art of War, and the strategies of how to fight warfare the smartest way, right? Well, is not the issue of dealing with fear an issue relating to strategy in war and winning and overcoming and dominating the landscape with God's confidence and expression? Well, of course it is. And so in his book, he taught, it's called The War of Art. And I believe that has a lot of meanings, but one of them is what is the biggest war you go to? How do you go to war? What are you at war with before you get to your art? And you may not be an artist or a musician, but I'm going to tell you the things that you have the deepest calling to do, you're going to face the most resistance in getting to. And not necessarily, we tend to say a lot, over the target, over the target. Oh, we're so over the target that must be why the enemy's beating us up. And, really it is a strategy. If you don't want somebody to ever find out their purpose or do what they're created to do, and you don't want somebody to bring in their A game if it's going to be a threat to your thing, then you find ways to undermine them, or you find ways to outright attack them. So yes, is it true that if you're about ready to deliver the payload to the world of what God has given you to bring, yeah, you can get direct flack, right? You can get direct attack. But this guy in his book, The War of Art, the warfare you go through to make your art, and also I believe the war we bring in our art, the power of the war we bring against the enemy when we're doing the things that raise us to the next level. The art of walking with God, the art of intimacy with God, the art of hearing God, the art of self-care, the art of intimacy and love in our family, the things that require the heart. They're the scariest thing. The art of actually having, the art of confrontation, the art of conflict, the art of showing up, the art of being known. All these things are the most deeply threatening to us, right? And the art of music, the art of creativity, the art of starting a new business, the art of parenting and mothering, these things that require of us to be to have this exposure and vulnerability that is kind of breathtaking. And in the book, The War of Art, he says that the number one thing that the artist, and let's just call you an artist because you are an artisan, you have an artisan soul. Erwin McManus wrote a book called The Artisan Soul, where everyone is a work of art, and the art of being fully who God has called you to be, which is the fullest expression of Jesus, is an artwork, right? And bringing that requires the art of life, the life skill of fear-free living, the art of fear-free living, if you will. And so call yourself an artist for a minute. He says that resistance, there's this deep thing called resistance that every artist has to face when you step to that next level of defining self-discipline and awareness and personal growth and God growth. And he says this, see if you can identify some of these things. He says resistance is the invisible energy field that is like a negative repelling force that repels you away from those things that are calling you into that deeper level of, I would say, vulnerability. The page, the empty page, the music, the performance, the relationship. It's an invisible repelling force. Have you felt that? When you're about ready, maybe it's when you're going to go minister to somebody or give a prophetic word and you feel an invisible repelling force making you want to run the other direction. Resistance is internal. It seems peripheral, because in my dream, there were peripheral things that were in the way between me and my guitar. There was the need, right? There was the need of this situation which would require me to be a caretaker, and the need was going to go on, and the commitment to the relationship was going to go on. I was literally going to marry someone who would require in the dream a lifetime of caretaking. Okay, and so that seems peripheral, right? Or the fact that my house is dirty, and in the dream there's so much I have to do, and I can't sit down and play music with these people because I got stuff that's in the way, and I'm the responsible one, and the house needs to be picked up, and there's chores, and there's this, and there's meals to make, and so resistance seems peripheral, like it's an opponent outside you, but it's really a self-generated enemy from within. This resistance, it resists us moving into the purpose, into the art. Resistance is insidious. It will tell you anything, it will do anything to stop you from doing your work. What is the work God has called you to do? What's the work you have to do? Is it self-care? Is it confrontation? Is it dealing with your addiction issues? Is it starting that business? Is it losing that weight? Is it having that hard conversation? Is it learning to show up for people when you want to hide? Is it moving out of depression? The feelings you feel of resistance show up and they'll tell you anything. They'll lie to you and say, oh, you can do it tomorrow. You don't need to do that. Nobody cares. Doesn't matter. You have so many other things to do. In my situation over the last few weeks, totally peripheral. We had a crisis in our community that needed attention. I was the best person to do the job. Sure seemed like it. I jumped in. I was the air traffic controller, made the trains run on time, did all that stuff. I'm not saying I wasn't supposed to do it, but I'm telling you, it masked an inner resistance because it was the important thing in the room that took up all the energy. And this guy says resistance is implacable. It can't be reasoned with. It's intractable. It's indefatigable. The resistance that comes against your purpose can't be reasoned with. It's intrepid. It's going to show up every day for you consistently. It's impersonal. It's a force of nature. Now, this is where I digress because I believe the resistance we come up against is very personal. I think it's very targeted by the enemy. I always say this: fear is personal and fear is aimed at your purpose, at your destiny. It says, this is something interesting that I found in his writing. He said, resistance is infallible because resistance unfailingly points you to true north. Now, if you substitute the word, and I'll explain that in a minute, you substitute the word fear or avoidance. Resistance is avoidance, is procrastination, it's sublimation. It's doing when you have energy that should be directed toward your work, the deep work you're called to, and you spin that out into other things and you pour it out and you drain it. Like when you have work to do, creative work to do, by its very definition, it's very focused. Even if you show up at the empty page and your mind wanders a bit, it's the fact that you were there making the risks, staying present, playing the scales, practicing the scales, doing the music, showing up at the trainers, eating the vegetables instead of the ice cream. It's very focused work. And resistance, fear manifests as a drain to that, as a draining of all of that energy to take the focus and kind of, well, I don't need to do that anymore. No one's ever going to read this book. I'm never going to be any thinner than I am. What's the point? I'll get a glorified body in heaven. I already know my husband and I are stuck. Look, my kids don't really care about me. What are the chances if I start this business that it's going to succeed? Do you see? It's a drain. It drains the focus of the energy you need to take the risk. Fear, what he calls resistance, is invisible. Like, I'm going to go through the list. It's invisible. It's an energy field. It's a negative repelling force. It's internal. It seems like it's about everything else around you. It seems like it's about the scary person who could be mad at you for asking if you can pray for their healing. But really, it's something inside you that's resisting the work that needs to be done. It's coming from in here. It looks like it's those scary people out there and those scary situations out there, but it's really self-generated, or it's the enemy generated that then works with our wiring to generate a continued drain of focus, right? Fear/resistance is insidious. It will tell you anything. It'll stop at nothing. And don't you recognize that in the voice of the Lord telling you anything just to slow you down? It doesn't matter. You don't know. Nobody cares. Like in my situation, I was promised a fantastic book deal with incredible distribution, like dream come true distribution. Well, so I embarked on writing a 10-book series. and I've done pretty good. But because the distributor person completely flaked and didn't show up and wound up being, not who they represented themselves to be, right? What's the internal story? No one cares. No one cares. Who's ever going to read your stupid books anyways, right? So that insidious, repelling force will give me every reason in the book to avoid, to drain my energy, to let it seep out into every other crisis that needs taking care of. In my dream, the energy was seeping out instead of being focused on, I'm going to go play with the musicians. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be the host. I'm going to be present. I'm going to be hearing. I'm going to be playing. It was drained into, no, I got to do the laundry. No, I got to clean the house. You see? And so it seems peripheral, like it's based on circumstances, but really it's an internal narrative. Fear is implacable. You can't argue with it. You can't reason with it. You can't say, let's make a deal. When you start making deals with fear and you start saying, you keep East Germany, I'll keep West Germany, we'll have a non-confrontational zone. It never works because fear is unwilling to leave you alone. Resistance, the avoidance, the fear, the procrastination is not ever going to stay in its lane. It absolutely will not. It is a force, and I believe it's personal. This guy thinks it's an evolutionary thing. He's right about a lot of stuff, but he's not right about this. Fear is personal. And it's like if you give it an inch, it'll take a mile. So if you're not consistently showing up to press into your work, your purpose, it is not going to just cut you a break and say, cool, you have Eastern Europe, I'll take Western Europe. When has that ever worked? Because with that mindset, there's infiltration. We think there are nice borders around the CCP that keep them over there doing their thing. But what have we learned? They infiltrate every institution. They buy up companies. They buy voting machines, right? Okay. Same thing with fear / resistance / avoidance / procrastination / energy drain. Okay. But here's the good news. Fear, that inner resistance you feel to doing the work you need to do, is infallible. It points to the true north of your purpose. So you need to start paying attention to where you feel the greatest resistance to your work. And I don't want you right now to focus on external, like attack. Satan's going to come and get me if I do this thing. No, I want you, because that, again, we make that peripheral. But what's that really saying? What's that really saying? The internal message is, I'm not safe to do my work. It's not safe to do my work. And that is one of the biggest internal narratives, is that you're not safe to do your work. You're going to get hurt again. You're going to get rejected again. Satan's going to hurt you. You're going to do it all and the world won't care. Or you're going to show up and disappoint yourself. That was one of the things, when I was much younger and I had not only stage fright, but writer's block as a composer. My biggest fear was that I would brave at going into the quiet place, pick up my guitar and start to write. And there would be nothing there. There would be no song. There would be no music. Or if it did, it would be really bad. And when you have a call to a certain work in your life, it's something you just internally can't bear to be bad at as a state of being. Got to get to the point where it's okay to be like, not as great as you will be, not as good as you will be. It's okay to show up. I'm here. I got a divine spark because Jesus lives in me. I got a purpose. We're going to get good at it. Okay. One of the deepest fears that we have surrounding the work, which creates the resistance against doing it, is the fear that we're not safe to do it. That it will be bad, we'll be shamed, we won't be enough, no one will care, it'll fail, I can't make any headway, right? These things then become actually the stepping stones of God outlining issues for us to get healed over so we can move forward. Because fear is a true north in and of itself. That inner resistance is saying to you, that's where the gold is. That thing you avoid the most. That conversation you avoid the most. That person you avoid the most. That work you avoid the most. That discipline you avoid the most. The thing that you hear that the second you go to do it, you got this huge internal narrative about how it's so not important. It won't matter. It's not spiritual enough. It's not leading people to Christ. It's doing all these other things. You really need to be over there working in this place, cleaning up, doing that thing because that's way more spiritual. Now, do we have to understand the servant heart? Do we need to pour it out? Yes. But we need to have the awareness of what's happening so we make conscious choices. If I need to make a conscious choice to give up something, to make a sacrifice, I want to be present for it. I want to be in dialogue with God about it. I want to know what's happening in my heart. I don't want to be spiritualizing fear. I don't want to be spiritualizing that inner resistance that keeps me from doing my work. And God will also give you a choice. Like he was saying, Jules, you can do that for the rest of your life if you want. I'm not mad at you. That save the world thing. Yeah, you can do that. But I'm giving you a choice and I'm making you aware of something else I put in you that not everybody has. Not everybody has this. Not everybody has what you have. And the world will always want, and in circumstances, will always try to suck the energy away from the work you know you need to be doing. So instead of that depressing us, maybe we use that as our true north. And we say, Lord, the deepest thing I face, the thing I'm the most scared to do, you're probably waiting for me right there. So here was my big thing when the Lord spoke to me and said, Julie, it's time for you to deal with your terrifying stage fright. He said, it's your time. I knew what he meant. I went in full on fight or flight physical response. And all I could say was this: big breath, all the fight or flight responses going, and say, Lord, I'll go wherever you want me to go, one step at a time, because you've never failed me. I will walk with you. And I said, just don't let go of my hand. Don't let me do this on my own, like he was. But that's what I was like, really scared. I was like, if you'll hold my hand, Lord, I'll walk one step at a time. And I'll learn how to do this with you. And that's where I started. And then I began to pay attention, because I said, every door you open, Lord. And I began to pay attention, because what began to happen, my friends? Doors began to open, opportunities for risk, and things like me getting the inspiration to read every book I could on stage fright. And I had a hard time finding them because they changed the words. It's not stage fright now. It's called performance anxiety. It's called social anxiety, blah, blah, blah. But I began to read, and I began to find out what happens in the body and what educates. And I even did a coaching session with somebody who had written one of those books to help me. And I began to find out what my resources were. And guess what? More resources came. And then I began to have just enough faith for a risk, like playing for my one neighbor. I invited my neighbor over and I said, will you listen to me play a song? And I was humiliated to have to do it, because I wanted to be known as the musician, as the artist, as, Julie Lavender, blah, blah, blah. I had some stuff in my bio that was kind of cool. Nobody knew how scared I was. And I had to pull my neighbor aside and say, will you come and listen to me sing a song? Because I'm dealing with stage fright, with performance anxiety, and I have to play for somebody. And you scare me just the right amount. You scare me just the right amount. Did you know there's just the right amount of scared for you today? It doesn't have to be the Carnegie Hall scared. It doesn't have to be the play for everybody out of nowhere scared. God has the right amount of scared for you today, with the right amount of person, right? the right person, the right setting. Your job is simply to say, yes, Lord, I'm going to do the work I have to do to become the person you've called me to be and release the gifts you've given me to give. We'll do it one step at a time with the right amount of scared every day for me to move forward. Are you getting it? Fear will point you to your true north of purpose. And guess what I did today? And it wasn't even super scary. Oh my gosh, you don't even have any idea how many times I whimpered in the dark because I was so afraid. Totally afraid. So what I did today was I realized that I've been neglecting performing and playing music because who cares, right? I don't have any gigs. COVID killed Dream Farm Radio in a lot of ways. People wouldn't come to the farm. I want to do jazz worship, and a lot of musicians were like, I'm scared to come play, you know. And a lot of people, you know, we were doing concerts and people were scared to come, but we did them anyway. And the brave ones came. And so, you know, it's easy. What's my internal narrative? Nobody cares, Julie. Get over it. You're in another phase of life. You know, go save the world, and don't worry about the music thing over there and the arts, because you know you're more Martha anyway. I don't know if that Mary artist thing is for you. Internal narrative. And then after what happened to me last week and the Lord giving me those dreams, I realized that there is the war of art. That for me, I have war I have to fight using art. And I wasn't paying attention and I wasn't listening. So I pulled out my guitar and I started playing for you guys because I needed to play for somebody, right? Well, then I was at this cafe here and they play jazz music, and I was like, hey, you know, I'm a jazz musician. And the guy goes, well, we've been thinking about having music here. So you know what I did today on my way home from my other thing? I stopped by and I said, I'm going to come by as soon as you close tomorrow and I'm going to play you a song. And if you like what you hear, I'm going to come and perform in your cafe on Sunday morning. I don't want any money. I'm going to play for my breakfast. And she was like, wow, really? Because all of a sudden it wasn't about, I just knew I have work to do. I have work to do. And that involves songs and singing and performing and putting it out there and not letting it die. Who cares who's in the room? I have work to do. Who cares whether they buy albums? I have work to do. Who cares if they ever know, you know, who I am or what I do or value it? I have work to do. And if I don't do it and I don't sing it and I don't write it and I don't bring it, something's going to die. I have the war of art. What do you have? What is the work you have to do? Where's the greatest resistance in your life? Pay attention. Pay attention. Right? Paint and draw your visions. Very good. So, go do something that's just the right amount of scared for you today. Okay? And hush now, my mind. Awake now, my soul. Hush now, my mind. Awake now, my soul. For here in my arms lies the earth and the sky and the seas and the reason I'm home. I'm home. When I see the oceans in your eyes, suddenly there's no tomorrow. And I hear the